Hey guys, welcome back to The Grey Escape. I'm Natalie Gray, and we have an incredible celebrity, wonderful human being, star of one of the most popular shows in pop culture in the last 2 decades. I'll tell you all about it right after this. So, yes, I know it's been a while since I put up the last podcast, and I'm not even going to make any excuses. There's a pandemic. I was in a car accident. There's a lot of trauma been happening. I'll probably be speaking about that at some point today. Yeah, everybody's in trauma right now. The world is in trauma. And you know what comes out of trauma? Change and growth. And it's like a plant with wilty leaves. No, I'm not going to spoil it. Trust me. Listen to the end of the episode and you're going to understand what I was trying to say there. This is new too. I'm Zooming this interview as well as recording for the audio podcast that'll go on iTunes and everywhere podcasts are downloadable from. So if you're listening to this and you want to see my guest today, then head on over to YouTube. The channel is The Grey Escape, because coming up right now, she's literally been in one of the most popular TV shows in the last 2 decades. It's risen to the top of pop culture, and her role in particular struck a nerve even with other celebrities. She's beloved. She's beloved as her character, and I think you're going to learn to see why she's beloved as the beautiful human being that she is. You may know her as Mrs. Patmore from Downton Abbey. I have come to know her as Leslie Nichol, and I'm excited for you to get to know her too. So here we go. We're diving right in, and we may have some technical difficulties. Hey, there's a pandemic, and this is my first Zoom interview, so enjoy. So this is pretty exciting to finally have a formal interview with you. At least it's exciting for me. So I'm sure you've had loads of interviews about Downton Abbey and Mrs. Patmore. For me, myself, I would love to know about your life prior to that. Like, had you ever done anything that was as significant as Mrs. Patmore?
I'd not done anything as significant as Downton Abbey. It was in a whole different level of professional kind of on the graph of things that are important. That was by far the most significant and global thing that I'd ever been involved in. So it had a huge impact on my life professionally and personally.
And obviously, I would imagine that it was all positive professionally.
Yeah, actually, yes, it was. It really was. I don't think there's been anything at all that I could say was harmful. Not the reverse, actually. It's just been in some ways, my career was fine. I'd always done fine. But, you know, sometimes you get a job that just puts you in a different level. And it opens doors that weren't open before. And that's what happened. And I mean, an example would be, I came to the States. I live in the States at the moment, though I am going back to the UK. But I came here maybe 10, 12 years ago because a friend of mine knew a big fancy agent here. And she said, I can get you in to meet him. And as often happens here, he was incredibly nice. But I didn't ask for anything, so I got nothing. Funny how that works. And really, he couldn't have been more charming, but actually there was zero interest.
Oh, okay.
Because all he could think of and all he said was, "Oh, you're a kind of you're a Julie Walters, you're a Brenda Blethyn." All he could do was think of who I might be like. He wasn't at all interested in who I was. so what happens is you do a thing like Downton Abbey, and then you become somebody that people know, and then all the doors are open.
Right.
And that was the difference.
And did you have a different agent in the US when you got Downton Abbey? I take it you never moved forward with that agent.
I that wasn't through an agent at all. It was through a friend that I met this. Oh, sorry, I met that theatrical agent. I mean, he didn't take me on, and I didn't ask him to take me on. Weirdly, I don't know what we were doing really, except I thought it was kind of fun to be in a huge, great, fancy office in Beverly Hills, but I didn't have the confidence to ask for representation, and indeed I didn't get it. Also, I didn't live here, and I didn't have a green card, which I do now. So all the circumstances were different. I mean, people, they can't do anything with you really if you haven't got the visa or the green card.
No, that's right.
I live here, so the whole circumstances were not. They just weren't. That wasn't the time to try here at all. But the point is, post Downton, the most insane people in this country suddenly know who you are.
Right.
And I mean, and I would include the Obamas and Hillary Clinton, for instance. That's how bonkers it gets.
Wow.
That's the change in your life. You suddenly realize those people not only know who you are, but apparently love you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yes, I can imagine. Now, not to be a bossy interviewer, but I hear a little bit of rustling. What would I be hearing that's rustling? Have you got anything?
Can't be that, can it?
It might be it might be the jangly jingly.
I can get rid of that, no problem.
There you go. Now, so getting back to, Hillary Clinton. Now, so I take it you crossed paths with the Clintons then?
I didn't. What happened was, in the first season, for some reason that I don't remember why, Hugh Bonneville and Elizabeth McGovern, Hugh played Lord Grantham and Elizabeth was his wife in Downton Abbey. And of course, Elizabeth is American. And they were over in this country doing some sort of publicity, I guess. And it took them to the White House. And they were at a function, and they could see this lady at the other end of the room kind of elbowing people out of the way. I mean, literally making a beeline for them because she was determined to speak to them. And it turns out it was Hillary Clinton.
Wow.
And they had a conversation, and this was only in the first season, so this shocked Hugh and Elizabeth sideways. And she actually said, and Hugh and Elizabeth brought this information back to us, she said, "Oh, we all sit together on Sunday in our PJs and we watch Downton together." So you suddenly have a picture of Bill and Hillary and possibly Chelsea in the pajamas watching Downton Abbey. Then it becomes surreal, and you go, is that even possible?
Yeah.
But it was. And those things continued to happen.
Yeah, yeah. I remember you saying about how celebrities loved you. You told me, was it Glenn Close who came up and just hugged you?
Yes, that was extraordinary. I was at something called the BAFTA Tea Party, which they have here in Los Angeles. So it's wall-to-wall stars, basically. And I was just there as a guest. And I have a friend who is a PR lady, and she looks after some fancy people, mostly fancy people, but she's lovely. She's a good friend and very down to earth. And we'd had a moment of conversation where I was nattering at somebody at the door, and I was saying, "Oh, we're going in a minute, we're going in a minute." And she said, "Oh, all right, lovely to see you." Da, da, da. And then about 15 minutes later, she made her way towards the exit with Glenn close behind her because she looks after Glenn. And Catherine just said, "I thought you were going." I said, "I know, I can't seem to get out the door." And just as she laughed and passed, Glenn Close caught my eye and just went, and then just put her arms out. And I was so taken aback that I suddenly went into kind of defensive mode. And as she hugged me, I said, "I'm not a stalker. I'm not a stalker. I'm a friend of Catherine's." Which was a bit silly, really, because it wasn't me who approached her.
Yeah.
And I didn't want her to think I was nuts, but I was so touched. I mean, it was nothing. It was a second. It was a moment. But what she seemed to be saying was, "I know who you are." And she gave me a hug, and then she went off. She didn't say a word, not a word.
Wow.
But it was extremely touching.
Yeah, that's lovely. And then the other person, and this is somebody I'm a fan of myself. What's the deal with J.J. Abrams?
Oh, that's kind of wonderful too, actually. That was another weird old thing. I mean, I didn't even know who J.J. Abrams was, only because I'm not hugely involved with science fiction, and I'm not quite tuned in enough to who everybody is in the film business. And my husband, of course, who's a huge sci-fi fan, knew and loved J.J. and I mean, is a huge Star Wars fan and all of that. So what happened was, some of the cast members and some of the crew said during one of the later seasons, "Oh my God, J.J. Abrams came on set the other day. He came onto your kitchen set and he not burst into tears. He definitely teared up."
Wow.
And the boys who knew specifically who he was were saying, "Isn't that incredible? He's a huge fan of the show, huge." So when I came to live here in the States, my agent, clever English agent, very clever man, he said, "I think you should go and meet JJ, as you didn't manage to do it on the day because you weren't there." So I said, "Yeah, okay." So off I went to Bad Robot, which is JJ's company, and I had an appointment to meet him. Wow. And some of his people. And so I decided to just be a bit camp, really. So I took him a pie from Trader Joe's, and I brought it in a Trader Joe's bag, and it said on the bag Trader Joe's, and I crossed it out and I put not Trader Joe's, Mrs. Patmore's pie, and I gave it to him, and he was absolutely adorable and sweet and kind and generous, and couldn't have been nicer person to speak to. And I have to say, I did get a little bit devious at this point, because the following year, this was probably the end of the year, the following year, we all knew he was coming to England to direct Star Wars. And so, fully knowing this, I said to him, "So you'll be coming to England to do the Star Wars movie?" And he said, "Yes, I will, yes." And I said, "Oh, I suppose there'll be a lot of secrecy around that, won't there?" And he went, "Yeah, oh God, yeah, very much so." So I said, "So there won't be any chance of a set visit, will there?" And he said, without a beat's hesitation, he said, "You can visit me on set anywhere in the world." To which I said, "Can I bring my husband, please?" Because my husband is like huge fan of Star Wars. And he said, "Of course you can." So we arranged it. And indeed, it was shrouded in secrecy. You had to hand your phone in. You had to write a disclaimer to say you wouldn't speak to anybody about it, which killed him because he wanted to put it all over Facebook. We went onto the set. We hung out with JJ by him when he was there with his cans on. We were invited to stand with him. We met Daisy and John Boyega. And then he let him go on and sit in the Millennium Falcon, which to me was some grubby old set. I just thought, this needs a clean up. But he was like speechless with excitement. I mean, he was. So it was worth it, actually, just for that. I mean, it was wonderful to meet him, and he couldn't have been nicer. But doing that for my husband was, well, he gave me a lot of brownie points. Indeed, it did.
Well, Star Wars fans all over the world will be literally fainting right now that you just referred to the Millennium Falcon as a grubby old set.
I know. What do I know? There was a broom there, and I nearly started cleaning it, and then I thought, "Oh, stop, no." But yes, it was lovely to see how excited he was. I mean, he was, and he sat in the very seat that is the seat. Yeah.
Well, gosh. When you did your audition for Downton, having done many auditions myself, what was the process like? Did you have to get called in back and back to go on a shortlist and another shortlist, or was it one audition and done?
It was one of those. Well, I don't know when else it has ever happened. I've been doing this job for 43 years, I think, something like that. And this has never, ever happened to me before. But it's just, I'll give you a little run into the audition because it'll then put it in context and it'll make you understand how just strangely all the planets were aligned on this occasion, because they're not always, they're just not. But on this occasion they were. I had met one of the producers, Liz Trubridge, in the park walking our dogs about 3 months before this. She was a friend and she had just got this job with Julian Fellows doing a big period drama. And most of our conversation was, oh, great, that's so good, such good news. It was a mate talking to a mate, thrilled that she'd got a good, fabulous job. And at the very, very end, she said to me, I think, there's a part you might be right for. I'll get you in for it. And as she walked away, I kind of went, and then put it to bed. Because in 40 odd years, I can't tell you how many times people have said that. And they do mean it at the moment. I'm not for a second saying she didn't mean it or she didn't think it through. But as we all know, things change. And they could have said, oh, no, we'll get Julie Walters in to do that. Or how about if she was, 6 foot tall? I mean, things happen and it goes away.
Yeah.
So I did not particularly attach any importance to it, though I was aware that this was October and I knew that in January they were casting. So I kind of kept an eye out for when that would happen. What's crucial to this is the year before, Liz had introduced me, not in person, but she had introduced my work and showreel and stuff to Julian Fellows, the writer, because she was working on a film with him and he was looking for somebody to play opposite Maggie Smith, a housekeeper. And Liz had put me in front of him as a possibility. And that had not worked out because, in fact, he wanted somebody more of Maggie's age, and they got the actress Pauline Collins, who is not actually quite as old as Maggie, but nearer than I was. So I was in his head. That is crucial. Right. He had a memory of me that was not too far distant. So somewhere between me meeting Liz and me being pulled in, there was a huge meeting, a casting meeting at ITV, which is the British network that put this on. They had their own criteria for casting. They already had Hugh Bonneville, who was a well-known name in the British, entertainment industry. There was Maggie Smith. They were ticking the boxes. They had people from Coronation Street and Benidorm, which are British shows. They like to keep their own actors in a gang, so they got a couple of them. And there was this part just available. And I know that Julian and Liz spoke up at this meeting and said, we've got an idea for Mrs. Patmore. Should we just put her on tape? And if you don't like her, we'll just move on. And they went, yeah, fine. Very, very unconcerned one way or the other. Just like, we'll give her a shot, see what happens. So I was called in to do 2 scenes on tape in front of the director, the casting director, and the producer. And I was aware that this was potentially a very good job. My husband did a bit of very good work on my nerves because I was possibly going to sabotage myself. And he did a great little kind of meditation-y thing, which he hasn't done very often, but it worked, a treat. I went in there very relaxed and very happy to do it and not attaching too much importance to it. I put my 2 scenes on tape. And about a week later, my agent called me and said, well, you've got it. And they never, ever looked at anybody else. Wow. That's the point. I had no competition.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen.
Right.
I don't even know why it did happen, but it did.
Right.
I had no competition. They just made the decision.
What year was that?
Sorry?
What year was that you...
That was 2000, beginning of 2010, I think.
2010, wow.
And the next bit of very good luck, and luck does play a huge part in all of this, is for those who don't watch Downton Abbey, I spent a lot of my time, I did a lot of my scenes with, I was the cook, and I spent a lot of time with a character called Daisy, who was a youngster, who was my kind of, she was lowest of the low at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
And in the grate making fires. I mean, she was the bottom of the pecking order. And over the years, she got slightly elevated and they formed a relationship that became very important, like a mother and daughter kind of relationship. There was a great sort of humour to it too. And that happened solely because Julian is a smart writer, and he sees what actors bring to things. And he told me not that long ago, he said, Mrs. Patmore was never intended to be funny. I didn't see her like that. I thought she was just, something quite different, formidable and serious and strict. He said, but because you and Sophie, who plays Daisy, have such a chemistry and such a shared sense of humour and all of this, he said that took him in a whole different direction. And because I love the bones of her, and she me, that's genuine. It's just genuine. And so he wrote for it.
Yeah, that is a good writer.
It is, and in some instances, I believe, and this is relatively new to me, but it exists. It didn't years ago, but it does now. They do chemistry reads, usually with men and women who are having a relationship. But they often want to see if actors have a chemistry. Well, that didn't happen. I think we had half a day's rehearsal at the beginning, which was a bit of a chat. That was it. There was nothing more to it. So, in fact, I'll tell you very briefly what happened was I was taken into the studio to meet the director with this girl, Sophie McShearer, who I'd never met. And they said, do you want to go and say hello to Sophie? She's down the end of the hall there. And I looked down the hall and I could see this young girl in what I can only describe as a trailer trash coat. And I was wearing the same coat. And I just thought, that bodes well. That's a sign.
Yeah, that does sound a sign.
And it was fabulous from there on in.
How sort of hands-on was Julian Fellowes?
He wasn't physically there. He was always looking at work. He saw work at the end of the day. It was all sent to him because he was a producer as well. But he wasn't on set very much at all. And we didn't have conversations with him at all. People say, did you suggest things to him? Well, no, we didn't. And you were actually just required to say his dialogue. People were not encouraged to ad-lib at all, improvise at all. It was, have you got it right? Because that's with a good writer.
Yeah.
Usually their version is better.
Right.
So your job was to do what he wrote, actually, because it would almost certainly be better than what you were making up. So he wasn't physically there, but he was very much part of the process and keeping an eye on it always. And of course, not everybody knows it, he was the only writer in 6 seasons. He wrote every word of it. And he started the whole thing from his head. He didn't adapt it from a story. Every character, every story came from the inside of Lord Fellowes.
And did you ever sort of understand where that came from in his head? I mean, had he had relatives who'd led a life like this?
Kind of, yes. I mean, he's married to Emma Kitchener Fellowes, who's from a very aristocratic family. I mean, his background is that kind of thing. I mean, but he'd been an actor. He's an interesting mixture. He certainly mixes in those circles. He does. But also, Julian was an actor primarily before he was a writer. So he's pretty down to earth as well. He's mixed with all sorts of people. So that's why he writes his downstairs characters as truthfully and as accurately as he does the upstairs. It's not like he doesn't know these people, because he does. And he's a terrific observer, obviously.
Right.
That's what makes a good writer. He one of the things. And also, look at the women. I mean, the women that he's written in this show, a raft of terrific, strong female parts. And he obviously has been around these women. I mean, he did say he was raised by some very strong women.
Right. And so 2010 you auditioned, and when would you say your life changed? Was it a slow grade, or was it okay?
Mm-hmm. It was, yeah. Because people often say, when did you know it was going to be something huge? Well, that was a slow burn. I mean, it really was. It happened in kind of fits and starts. It happened at home first, of course, because it hadn't gone to the States yet. So the first thing, I remember that one of the first moments I thought, this is a bit different. I was walking my dogs in a park in London, and there was a lady who I vaguely knew, who was another dog owner. I vaguely knew her, but barely knew her name. And she one day was charging across the park towards me with her arms out. Now, as we all know, the Brits are not given to that.
No.
generally speaking.
No.
It's not their natural way of expressing themselves.
No.
Not like in the States, where
Right.
they're very happy to do that, and they
Right.
do. So this lady kind of flung herself at me and said, "Oh," and this is maybe 4 weeks in. She went, "Oh, I love it. I love it. And guess what? Oh my God, my husband loves it." That was the beginning of something that we, all of us, got all the time. Nobody could
Yeah.
understand why the men were liking it, but they were. And then it got weirder. Then it went to America. And then, the Hillary Clinton event happened. And Hugh came back and went, "You guys, you are not going to believe what the heck is happening over there. It's off the charts. It's off the charts." And then people would say, "Oh, my brother-in-law, he lives in Seattle. He only watches the Super Bowl. He won't have anybody come to the house on a Sunday. He just won't have it." And you go, "A beer drinking man from Seattle? Wow." And then it got global. And then people said, "Well, 160 million people in China watch that."
God.
And indeed, I was recognized because that got me involved with a charity called Animals Asia in China, because I was able to help raise awareness for them, because people did seem to know who I was. And I was recognized by a farmer in China, in a field.
Wow. How long were you in China?
Well, I've been half a dozen times now. They have two sanctuaries. They have one in China and one in Vietnam. So I've been to the one in China maybe 4 times.
I've been to China a bit with my shoe design in my former life as a shoe designer. So I know kind of what it's like over there. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, funnily enough, once I got to the sanctuary, I went with my husband, Dobbs, and because we were only going to be there a few days, it was like, well, we should go and see some stuff. So we went to see the Great Wall of China, and we went to Beijing. But quite honestly, once I got into that sanctuary, I did not want to leave. I really didn't. I should care about looking at this country, but I don't really want to go anywhere. And that's weirdly what happens every time. I mean, I'm usually a very curious traveler. I love travel. I love it. But there's something magical, life affirming and extraordinary about this sanctuary, because they've rescued these animals that have been abused so horrifically. And they are safe and loved, and they've got the respect they deserve, and huge amount of Chinese staff. People are very quick to say, "Oh, the Chinese, they hate animals." It's not true. I mean, these people are fabulous and take great care of these animals. And it's just an extraordinary place. I could just stay here for the rest of my life, actually. I've got no interest in visiting the museum,
Yeah. It must have been, though, emotionally hard to see the animals, to know their stories.
Well, it's a roller coaster. I mean, it is an absolute roller coaster. That's the day on a sanctuary, because I can remember the first day. It was, they put a pair of, this is what happens when you play a cook in a big TV show. They put a pair of bear ears in my head, and they had me in the kitchen chopping vegetables.
Nice.
So this is Patmore making food for the bear. And I was happy to do that. I was lolloping about doing all kinds of nutsy things, and I'm fine. It's fine. Whatever gets the story out there, it's fine. Then they were doing a health check, which they do from time to time on every bear. So you go in and you are actually with this bear that's been put under, so you can hold his paw and you can see what they're doing. And I clipped the nails of a moon bear. They're called moon bears because they've got a yellow crest on their chest. That's all that is. But they're big. And so I clipped the nails. Very difficult, by the way, very solid. And so that was kind of marvelous. And then somebody comes in and says, "I'm afraid, bad news, Frodo is going to have to be euthanized today." So then you go, "Oh no, really?" So then I'm taken in to meet Frodo. And you can sort of feel and sense the distress of his carers, because this poor bear, after years of being trapped, crushed in a cage, which is what they do to take their bile, they crush them in a cage so they the level of arthritis and disfigurement is so bad that there came a point where they'd managed to manage Frodo's pain and make her have a decent life, but there came a point where it wasn't fair or kind. So the next thing you know, you're going to a funeral.
Right.
And that was one of the most moving experiences of my life. and they because it's all about giving this animal respect. There used to be a number. They now have a name. They are given a proper burial where everybody on site comes to that funeral. They have the most exquisite poem that they read in English and in Chinese. They asked me to read the English bit, and I was like, oh God, I can't even string two words together.
Right.
And then they throw flowers and they throw the toys that the bear loved into the grave, and they mark the grave. And that's that. And then you go and go and look through the enclosure, and you can see 4 bears having a whale of a time in a pool, splashing about, having a marvelous time. Obviously, being able, through the trust that they've managed to regain of humans, they've managed to get a really good level of life back. And as they always say in the sanctuary, they teach us every day. You know, if you'd been abused that badly, sometimes they're in the cage for 20 years. I mean, if you think back, Natalie, for those of us who are old enough to think back 20 years, 20 years. You just think specifically, where were you 20 years ago? You know, that's how could anybody, and Jill Robinson is the wonderful woman who started this whole thing and has been campaigning for 20 years. And by the way, with the government in Vietnam on her side, they're about to stop it completely next year. So thankfully, they've got a goal, and they've reached the goal in Vietnam. But I said to Jill once, very early days, I said, I don't understand, Jill. How does any sentient being that has a brain and emotions survive this? I mean, they bite the bars to try and get out, of course, because they can't. She said, you know, there's something that bears are. They're stoic. It's part of their nature. So it's kind of devastating, because this wonderful strength and stoicism that they have means that they don't give up, which means they hang on and hang on. It's the most wicked abuse of an animal.
It's so heartbreaking. And I mean, there's no denying, I think the world knows these days, there's issues in China when it comes to the treatment of animals across the board.
But what there is, people don't concentrate on, and I think they should, because it's true. I'm not trying to say there is no cruelty in China. There certainly is cruelty in China. Well, actually, there's cruelty everywhere.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about trophy hunters? Do you want to talk about the horrible Brits and Americans that go and pay thousands to kill a beautiful lion? I mean, that's how wicked can that be? There's cruelty in every country in the world. What there is in China that is different now, because a lot of people think of in the olden days, but now, for instance, in the dog and cat meat trade, a high percentage of the dogs that get taken to the meat markets are stolen pets. They used to just rear them on farms and put them to slaughter. Now they steal them from people. So here's the difference. Years ago, when people would eat dog because there was nothing else to eat, things have changed. That's not the case there anymore. So there's a huge change of attitude to animals, huge. And I've seen it. I've been there. I've watched how kids are in the schools. I've watched older people in an old people's home, because Animals Asia take animals in like therapy dogs to remind people that these are friends, not food. So there's a huge uproar about the bear bile industry from a lot of Chinese people. They know it's a stain on their country, but it's a sensitive subject because it still makes money for some people, and it's still a battle to be waged. But for instance, as things change, they know that you can make bear bile from herbs. There's a herbal alternative. So there's no reason to abuse an animal. There's just no reason.
Why do people even drink bear bile or eat it? I've never.
Because it has some properties that have some. I mean, it's a fact. It can have some benefit to liver issues and eye issues. But the point is that can be got from a herbal alternative.
Right.
So you don't need. You do not. Nobody will die because of lack of bear bile. It's ancient, and it's dying. It's a dying trade. But, you know, as long as people, what they've done is they now make it into wine or face cream or anything they can to just keep some sort of income. But it's dying, and also the youngsters, because Animals Asia are educating the youngsters all the time. You know, they're just horrified when they see what's happening. The point is, years ago, it was kept completely under wraps.
Yeah.
Nobody. That's how Jill found out about this. She was on a tourist tour, knowing that round the corner there were going to be some bears that were being kept in terrible conditions, and she broke away from the group and she went down into this hellhole, lines and lines of cages of these poor distressed animals, and one put her paw on Jill's shoulder. And she turned around, and Jill knows about animals. She was working with IFAW at the time, the International Federation for Animal Welfare, and she said, "You don't take the paw of a wild animal. That's ridiculous. Nobody does that. They're wired to pull your arm off." But this female bear put her paw through the bars to Jill, and they connected, you know, eyeball to eyeball. She took the paw of this big female bear, and this bear gently squeezed Jill's hand. And Jill knew there was a big message coming, and she went home and she spoke to her friend Virginia McKenna, who was the lady who was in Born Free, who does a lot of work with the lions and stuff in Africa. And Ginny said, "Jill, you've got to do something. You'll regret it if you don't." Right. So that's been Jill Robinson for the last 20 years.
Oh my gosh, it's such a battle.
But she is making a huge difference. And as I say, Vietnam, it's going to be completely illegal by next year. There's no way they will be able to do it.
I mean, there's also, besides the bile, I mean, there's the bear paw in China. The bear paw, they have like
the parts,
the part, like and then there's the shark fin and the monkey brains. There seems to be things that all are kind of devastating to that animal species, and they only want a small bit of it for the potency. I mean, I don't know if there really is a potency in a shark fin, but I know it's certainly believed in their culture that there's a power to eating the shark fin, you know. I mean,
less so. Definitely less so. If it's not the same as it was. And these things, they're still, as long as they make money, but it's the same with trophy hunting. As long as somebody can, you know, take $20,000 off somebody, they're going to make sure they breed. They've got more lions and tigers in captivity being bred to be shot than they have in the wild.
I mean, you make a very good point when you say there's cruelty everywhere. So I definitely don't want to just point the laser at China, because, you know, in a lot of countries we eat veal, and that's a terrible, that's a terrible, you say about the bear being in a cage, you've got the baby cow in the wooden crate, you know, so there's not an innocence over here in the meat industries, and there's so much.
And you know what, and because of the internet, we're seeing more things that they were very, very carefully keeping behind closed doors. Right. I saw a picture the other day of a female sow stuck. She can't move, you know, and her little piglets are there feeding from her. She's never going to be allowed to nurse, to be with them, and she can't move until she's fat enough to kill. I mean, I've stopped eating meat for that reason. I never expected that to happen. But I suddenly saw the connection between my two dogs, who I adore, and I know you have dogs too. Why are they different? They're not.
I know. Well, I mean, I don't eat meat now, and for the most part, I'm vegan. You could call me a weak vegan. You know, but I'm trying.
There's a cheating vegan. I've been a chegan, which is a cheating vegan.
Right.
And do you know what? You are what you are. Don't let anybody start getting involved. It's your decision.
Yeah, I feel that way as well.
Yeah. It's not helpful when people start weighing in. I simply went this way because I was taken to a farm sanctuary by Jill, actually. She knew what she was doing on the quiet. And she said, "Oh, come to this place. It's lovely animals. You can come and pet them and talk to them, and it's gorgeous." They've been saved from slaughter or in terrible kind of back street kind of farms where they're just, I mean, awful stories. And I went there just fully thinking, oh, lovely, I'm going to meet a few cows and a few goats. And I'm on the floor with Sophie the pig. And this is what happened. And I did not expect to change my eating habits. I, like you, would not have gone near veal. When I ate meat, I wouldn't have gone near veal, and I wouldn't have gone near foie gras, because that's also absolutely horrendous. But I wasn't really aware of what goes on. Right. I mean, what they do. I mean, when you start looking at it, it defies. I mean, you can't.
I know. It's so barbaric. Like the foie gras thing, I didn't know either. And I believe Ricky Gervais is a big advocate against pate and stuff, because they literally shove a plastic pipe down the goose's throat.
Build up the liver to it. I mean,
they fatten it. They
looking into it. Yeah. You see, so what's clever is they keep this away from people as much as they can. And the other thing is, it so freaks people out that they don't want to know. So the meat industry kind of depends on that, because that's useful. Because if people don't want to know, then they can keep doing it.
Yeah.
And ignorance is bliss. And they can just, and then so you get the blooming milk carton with a cow lolloping around in a lovely pig.
I know, the smiley pig. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that that cow is actually producing the milk for her calves. Well, the calves don't. That milk was never intended for us. I mean, it just wasn't. So they record the distress of the calf and the mother being separated, and you go, oh, no, this isn't all right. This isn't all right. But it's a huge old battle, that one. And all I'm saying is, I would never preach about this. I hope I don't sound like I am now.
No.
It literally came to me, I was unawares, but some little light bulb went on in my head, and it just went, I don't think I was aware quite of the reality of this. And the point is, I love my dogs. Yeah. They're my family. I would never see anyone hurt them. So why would I do it to any other animal? They are the same. And when you meet the moon bears, they all have personalities. They're not just big brown blobs. They have personalities, like your two dogs, have distinct and very obvious personalities and emotions. You see how they're naughty, they're loving, they're whatever. So are mine. I mean, then we're not trying to make them into people, but they're not just blobs.
No, that's right. They're very, very unique. I think for me, when I was in China, I spent a total of 5 months over there, and I loved it. And I loved working with the Chinese people, and I love their sense of humor. And the things, though, that would strike me as shocking because we don't have it in our culture was when I started to see the puppies in the crates on the street. And at first I was like, oh, puppies, you know, and then my translator with me, I was like, why are they selling puppies on the street? Do people really like puppies here? And he's like, no, those are meal dogs. And I was like, what? And he said they buy those, and they were like Alsatians, or in America, they call them German Shepherds, big dogs. And they said they grow them and then they eat them. And it was so foreign because we don't have it in our culture, but equally there's things we have in our culture. So as you say, it's everybody, you pick up the sheets under anyone's animal industry anywhere in the world, and you're going to find some disturbing things, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to just think about England, what do the posh people do? They run around on horses and they tear foxes to shreds.
And pheasants, shoot pheasants, right? Yeah. That are raised to be shot. Yeah. They're just raised to be shot.
Absolutely.
By posh people.
What's okay with that?
Right. Exactly. Luckily, we're not posh, are we, Leslie?
No, we're not. No, we're not. But, you know, anyway, you don't have to look far anywhere in the world for people that are just treating them like they have no value.
Right. And, well, you got to come over to my house and meet my dogs and to share with the listeners. One of them had recently hailed from the Downey shelter in Los Angeles. And yes, you remember correctly, he was quite naughty. And I believe within 60 seconds of you meeting him, he was humping your arm. That was Harry.
I'm a naughty dog myself, yes.
And you took it very well. And I was literally, oh my God, I've got Leslie Nichol in my house and my dog is humping her arm.
But you know what? I have to remember this because, of course, we all get mortified by the bad behavior of our dogs. if we have bad dogs, and I do too. And the fact is, you have to remember you're talking to a dog person.
Yeah.
So they really don't care.
No, that's right.
The worst ever, I'll tell you what, here, we were invited to some relatively new friends to their very nice house. He's a specialist in myeloma, a very nice, very lovely home. We were invited to Christmas dinner, and the dinner table was all made out, with all their priceless glassware and, stuff. And we were in the kitchen, and then I heard Brian say, oh God, oh my God. And I said, what? Bertie, my Bertie, Tibetan Terrier, is on the table. He's walking on the table. And you go, what the hell? I don't let him do that. Well, he's never even done that before in his life. Then we got him down and nothing was broken, thank goodness. And then minutes later, he went, oh dear, oh God. And I went, no. And he had a table with desserts laid out. Bertie's on there. He's walking through the... So, and they said to me then, and you have to remember this, they said, it's fine, just get him off. We're dog people. It's fine.
Yeah. There definitely is such a thing as dog people. And it's probably what we were able to identify about each other quite quickly was this element of being dog people. Because you and I met through the film Piney the Lonesome Pine that is not out yet, where my partner is the star and he plays Piney the Lonesome Pine. And you also play a tree.
I play an old tree, yeah.
and Simon Pegg is a co-star alongside yourself and he plays a dog called Jack.
And Paminda Nagra is in it too.
Yes, yeah. And Jonathan Pryce, Oscar-nominated Jonathan Pryce, also playing your counterpart, Tree. Oh, no, Jonathan Pryce, Grandpa Sid. That's right.
Yes, there was a very lovely, older, very clever voiceover actor whose name has just left my brain, who plays the other tree.
Got it. Yeah. So that was nice. We got to meet at some things and sort of hit it off with our love for dogs and stuff. And we've got to know each other a bit, and I've sort of confided things in with you about stress and trauma, which I've been through a lot. And I was kind of curious, and really this can be just a yes or no answer, doesn't need to give detail, but I'm curious if you've ever experienced a significant trauma in your life.
I suppose I haven't had an enormous amount of trauma. I lost both parents. That's never fun.
No.
That's terrible. But I think that, I have been pretty blessed, actually. So I was just thinking the other day, I was reading something about how we really are all in the same boat. I mean, we are all on this planet doing this thing called life. And the fact is, stuff happens, and I do believe it's supposed to happen to you, good and bad, because it's what makes us grow.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be growing at all. And I think the purpose, without getting too woo-woo, I think the purpose, as far as I can see, for being here is that you evolve if you can.
Yeah.
And that means good will happen and bad stuff happens.
Right.
And it happens to everybody in different degrees, all different, but it happens. I don't think anybody can exist here without suffering something to a larger or lesser degree.
Right.
It's bad, and it's really, do you learn from it? Can you move on from it? And that's the challenge.
I mean, this is a current hot topic for me because, as you know, I've been going through a lot. And at some point, I'll talk about it on my podcast. I think I've hinted about it in the past. Listeners know that I had a car accident in 2018. And it turns out that triggered PTSD from a trauma from my past. And then something happened last year, which again, I was ambushed. It's so there's this trigger of a trauma, literally of being ambushed years ago. Now you see me shake now. I don't know if it shows up on camera. I've literally had shaking. And if I get triggered talking about the topic or things that in my neurons in my brain trigger that same kind of pathways, I've been having very violent shaking. And it's been a long time now. I mean, it's 2018, July was a car accident. The re-traumatization happened last September. I've been in wax of heavy duty counseling for PTSD. And it was so hard to deal with for a while. I couldn't comprehend, why has this happened to me? It was so difficult to live and go through this trauma, the pain and anguish. And I had a stutter, which will still come back talking about it. And then as I'm healing slowly and recovering, I find a lot of analogies and metaphors around. And one happened last week that was quite powerful. I've started to organic garden, as you know. I've showed off my pictures of my seedlings. And so I started to grow summer squash, and then I moved them when they were quite big. Well, it turns out you're not supposed to do that. So I moved these 5 summer squash that were giant, like the freaking Amazon. But I put them, because I know nothing, I put them in like a little planter with like lettuces. So now I've got little lettuces, and then I've got summer squash, you know. So I'm like, oh, this is obvious. I'll just move the summer squash. So I moved them to another location, and within hours, they like all wilt. And I'm literally like, I'm devastated. I'm emotionally devastated because I've been growing them, nurturing as a healing thing from me. To heal me, I've been nurturing other things, other people, seedlings, my pets, because by doing things to heal others, you can heal yourself, you know. So I moved these summer squash, and I'm looking through them, and they're wilting, and I feel devastated, but I carry on watering them on some glimmer of a prayer that they're going to resurrect. but they're dead. They're dead. So but I water them anyway. Well, they looked dead. They were totally wilted and dying and everything. They were full on dead. So I water them anyway because I'm in denial that I've killed 5 thriving summer squash. No kidding. 2 days later, I see the middle of them start to stand upright again. Some of the leaves of the summer squash. And I call my partner, who you also know, Jason. I'm like, look, there's life. There's life. And I'm continuing to water them. And the middle, a new growth is coming from the middle. They're not dead. But what is dead is the side leaves. They're just dried up and dead. And what each summer squash plant has done is it's survived on part of itself. When it transitioned to the new soil, it has used its own self up to survive and grow anew. And it
doesn't want to leave you, does it?
No, well, my partner says, what the thing I'm coming around to about this trauma thing is, my partner said, oh, this is a metaphor for you with your trauma. You thought you were just like, you'd had it, but you're coming back now. And I said, this metaphor for me is, you don't have to cut off part of yourself to come through trauma. That part of yourself that is traumatized now becomes the fuel that helps you grow and move forward. Those squash leaves became the fuel for those new sprouts and new squashes that are growing and everything. I don't know. Is this a weird analogy?
Which is actually much more acceptable, isn't it? That's an acceptable idea. It's kind of easier, I think, to accept that and say, this is part of me. This is part of my journey. We're all on a journey. It happened.
Right.
You can't deny it.
Right.
So own it, if you like, but don't let it crush you.
Right.
And you're not going to do that. You have absolutely decided not to do that, and it won't. But you can't dismiss it as non-existent or not being there. But you can definitely move on from it and take it along and do what you like with it. I suppose it's you taking mastery of it if you can.
I mean, for me, my coping mechanism with trauma has always been to put it outward as best as possible creatively. So I was a stand-up comedian for a long time, and I would even make jokes about trauma and make funnies. I did a couple of one-woman shows about trauma, and now I write a lot of poetry. I don't know if it shows up again on the camera, the little shakes. Probably it does, but
No, it doesn't.
Okay,
No, it
okay.
doesn't.
I feel them myself, but they mostly come from my abdomen, my core.
Just going to say that's where it will come from, right in there. That's
Yeah.
the part of the
Yes.
feeling. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Now your partner, who I've come to know as well, you are the most bizarrely matched people one could ever imagine. Your partner, you'd think, oh, Leslie Nichols' husband, he's probably like an actor or a writer. And I meet you and I'm like, what does your husband do? Well, he's a martial arts master, right? And he's probably got a more fancy title than that.
Yeah, I mean, he would never, because he is a man with zero ego, he would never call himself a master, but he is. Yeah, he's a martial artist of many, many years experience. He started when he was 14 years old, doing Kung Fu, I think, and he worked his way around all of he was a little working class lad from Aldershot in Hampshire in England, not a spiritual background at all, not anything like that, but because the martial arts does encompass that, he's had this weird old path where for many years he was an aircraft engineer in the RAF. Then he was in construction, so he was a sort of builder / engineer for many years, hanging out with those kind of people. That you can sort of see that scenario. But he always practiced martial arts, and eventually he came through to do ninjutsu, which is sort of the art of the samurai, and often went to Japan to learn with his Japanese master, Dr. Hatsumi. And so he was having these parallel lives, if you like, of martial arts, and which had him interested in things like Reiki, so he became a Reiki master and those kind of things. And then he was earning a living, with his hands, being an engineer and doing that. And then at 50-something, he had a heart attack. I mean, here you go.
Wow.
Sometimes crap happens.
Right.
And sometimes it's something that changes your direction.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened to him. He got through this heart attack and he just went, what am I doing? I don't have any interest in this field. I don't know why I'm doing it. So he always kept the martial arts going because it's who he is. But it took him into another area of life where he was investigating something called light body integration, sort of spiritual stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a very large part of who he is, but I think you'll agree when you meet him, there's nothing kind of guru about him. He's very, very down to earth. And what's wonderful about him for me is we met very late in life. I mean, I didn't meet him until I was in my 50s. And it's been just brilliant to know him and to marry him and to be with him, because I'd never met anybody like him before. I mean, I just never met anybody I could possibly marry. I mean, it took years to find him. But what's fantastic is that when I first met him, he had no experience of my world, none, zero. But I remember I did a TV show and I went to see a screening of it and he came with me. Now, sometimes to those events, I mean, you're okay because Jason, again, like your partner, is fully confident of who he is, quite safe in his own skin, and anyway, he knows our world. So that wouldn't be an issue. But to take somebody who's nothing to do with our business, you might think, oh God, I'll have to look after him. No. As soon as we walk in the door, he's off, he's gone. And he's not networking or anything. I mean, he's got nothing to prove or to
right.
He just likes chatting, so he's off. And this show was called Hancock and Joan. It was about a British comedian called Tony Hancock, who had an affair with a woman called Joan Le Mesurier, who was a lady who was married to an actor called Ian Le Mesurier, who was in a thing called Dad's Army. And it happened later on in his life. And I played Joan's mum. Anyway, the real Joan Le Mesurier was at this screening. Now, I'm a bit shy. I don't seem it, but I am. That's one of the things I've had to deal with. That's why I became an actor, actually. But I was paralyzed with shyness as a youngster. Sometimes, like your stutter comes and bites you, my shyness comes and bites me. It just can, and I know it can. So I'm at this screening, not fully confident and flinging myself around the room, because that's not who I am. But he is, and he comes back and he goes, oh, hello, just to tell you, Joan would like to meet you. So, what? Joan Le Mesurier. I've just been talking to her. She'd like to meet you. I'll just give you one more example, weirder than this. We were at our friend's party some years ago in London. A British actress called Sue Johnston, who's adorable. And at this party was George Michael, the George Michael.
Wow.
I'm too shy to go and say hello to him. Not him. He goes and talks to George. He comes back and says, hey, George just said he'd like to meet you. Thing is, when he was in prison, Downton Abbey got him through his prison sentence. He just told me.
Oh my God. Good Lord.
Not bothered. Fine. Me and George, he goes. Me and JJ. Yeah.
Wow. What was that like to meet George Michael?
Well, I barely did. I was just very, very retiring. Sort of went, hello. You know, I mean, I just didn't engage with him particularly because I was a bit overawed. Well, but Dobbs was not overawed. Very happy to meet George.
That was totally going on a tangent. That was a sad loss. That was George Michael.
Terrible.
That
terrible.
was.
And it turns out now, when you learn about him, I was at an animal rescue home in London last year called the Mayhew, and I bumped into a bunch of ladies who are like, since his death, they're still his gang of women, and they raise money in his memory for charity. And you find out all kinds of things about him now, that he was a fantastically generous, kind man. That he didn't talk about it much when he was alive.
I mean, he was so young. Was he even turned 50?
Yeah.
Like early 50s or something. Just so many sad losses came in a run, didn't there? Because there was like David Bowie and Alan Rickman and George Michael. Yeah. Did you ever work with Alan Rickman?
No. I mean, I'm laughing because my only claim to fame, and it's not a fascinating story, but it is my only link with Alan Rickman. I was on a train once with a bunch of actors, and there were another bunch of actors sitting across the way, and he was one of them, and he brought me a cup of tea. But I melted when he asked me if I wanted a cup of tea, because do you remember that voice?
Yes. Yeah, I was very sad when he passed away. Very sad. I mostly knew him from the Harry Potter films, and he's just was so iconic.
Well, I did a show here called The Catch, which was a Shonda Rhimes show, and the girl who played my daughter is English, and I learned a lot about him from her because he was an older kind of mentor in her life, and she told me a lot about how he supported her as a young actress, and she eventually ended up living here with her husband, who's American. She lives in Malibu, and he came to visit her, and he was so genuinely thrilled that this wee girl had grown up and got a career and got herself living in Malibu. I mean, just generous, kind, supportive kind of man. Yeah.
Whenever these, losses happen, they're always a little bit of a wake-up call as well. Especially I find because of my age, if anybody happens remotely in my age and they pass away, it's just a reminder of, good God, like, can happen to anybody. And you think, especially I thought lately, I mean, with the world now, we're in a pandemic. So you had come over for dinner early before the pandemic, and we were supposed to come over again.
You were supposed to come here.
I was supposed to come to you, and you were part of the catalyst to make me take the plunge to go from vegetarian to vegan, because it was interesting, because Piney the Lonesome Pine, to bring that back, the filmmakers are vegan, Jane West Baker Inc. and Jay Baker Inc., who are lovely, delightful people. So they're vegans. And so I'd met them and you at a similar time, and here you are all really thriving and full of vitality. And I thought, I'm almost there. Like, I really was almost there. I think it was the cheese on the pizza was the killer. That was the killer. But then we found this Blaze pizza. Oh my gosh. And they do the vegan cheese. So that allowed me.
Getting better. Yeah.
There's more stuff. And then when I found the Beyond Burger, which anybody listening, if you can get your hands on a Beyond Burger, especially they've got a new variety and it's got a new, more meaty taste. And even Jason, who was a big meat eater, now that's it now. Mostly vegan, but for sure vegetarian. Beyond Burgers, we stock to the rafters with Beyond Burgers. And Jason makes the burgers Carl's Jr., I know they're in Los Angeles. I don't know where else they are, truthfully, around America, or if they're anywhere else. They serve the Beyond Burger now. And I defy anyone to tell the difference between the beef one and the Beyond. And you've got Burger King now, 2 for $6. Impossible Whopper, 2 for $6. Do I like a coupon? Yes, I do.
Yes, of course you do.
Of course I do. Of course I do.
I'll tell you what, because my husband isn't vegan, and the reason for that, he was macrobiotic for a long time, and then it turned him off completely. I mean, it just stained his brain with vegetables and things. But anyway, that's his choice. I have nothing to do with that. But unfortunately, he was my cook. One of the reasons I was so thrilled to meet him was he is a good cook, and he did all my food. And I mean, actually, that wasn't a very healthy state. You should know how to cook your own food. So I've had to go to cookery lessons. So I've been to vegan cooking classes, because I thought, if I don't, what will I be eating? A baked potato? I mean, God's sake.
Yeah.
And the more I've had to put time and energy into it, and it's much easier now, of course. I mean, because there's so much on the internet, on Twitter, wherever. I mean, you don't have to struggle to find nice stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things I used to miss terribly was cauliflower cheese, because I love that. And there's a thing you can make, a cheese sauce with cashew nuts. You soak the cashew nuts and you blend them with nutritional yeast and lemon juice and da-da-da. And honestly, I'm not saying it's 100% like a cheddar cheese, but it's every bit as good. And as long as you find replacements that are really good, like you were saying, the Beyond Burger, if you cook it right and have the right stuff with it, if you think about it, burgers are usually covered in pickles and mayonnaise. And you can have all of that.
Right.
You can have your veganese on top. I defy anybody to think that is different from mayonnaise.
I know.
If you stick all the usual stuff on it, why would you think it was any different?
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, we're big fans of the Veginaise. We buy that brand Veginaise, which I guess that's what you're saying as well. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, well, I call it Veganase, but I don't think it makes a difference. It's the same thing, and it's delicious. And I'll tell you what, I don't know. It's gathering momentum. This whole
yes.
And I particularly see it in London when I go back to London. Every time I go there, I'm like, I'm in a pub and they're offering me 3 vegan options, and I mean proper food, not a lettuce leaf. They're offering 3 things that somebody's thought about. And every time I go, all the stores, all the supermarket chains are offering decent stuff. And you go, God, this is ridiculous. But the point being, when you're talking about Jason and he's eating his meat, you don't have to care about animals. Not everybody does. It's a fact. They just don't. But if you want to talk about your health, this isn't woo-woo. This isn't made up. It's a fact.
Yeah.
There are people, I found out about a cardiologist here who actually, and this is not made up, this is proven, scientifically proven. He was treated like a flaky a few years ago by the medical community. They can't do that anymore. His name is Dean Ornish, and he has reversed heart disease, and he has reversed diabetes.
Wow.
And it is done entirely with diet. Now, you can say, oh, that can't be right, that's rubbish. But the facts are there.
Yeah. Well,
there's a body of evidence.
Yeah.
And there's only so long you can say, there. That you have to say, sorry, it appears to be true.
Well, I'm a big believer.
To that extent. But if you eat less meat, your body's going to be better.
Yeah. I'm fully a believer, and there was a couple of turning points on long ago. The animal cruelty side started to first carve into me a bit, and I saw a film called Earthlings, which really was life-changing. And have you ever seen that one?
I have never had the courage.
Well, you don't need to, Leslie. I'd say if you're already vegan, you don't need to watch this film, because
I know a number of people who watched it and never ate meat again.
Right. It was so upsetting, but all true, So I was, not eating meat for a while, and then I fell off the wagon because I didn't know how to be properly vegetarian or vegan. So I'd get sort of faint and fainty and this sort of stuff. And then I met you guys, and now this is Here's a trauma thing for you. So I've totally, my short-term memory, I've forgotten what I started to tell you there. This is a PTSD thing. This is, it happens sometimes.
Right. Well,
let's demonstrate PTSD. It was, now I remember now. Now I remember. So it was that I don't need convincing on the health front. So the next documentary that I saw years later was that one, Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead. Now that documentary, ooh, I would recommend to absolutely everybody. Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead. It's, I'm certain, on Netflix. And it's not just for people who are overweight. It's a guy, it was an Aussie guy, had a heart attack, and he starts to get a wake-up call in life. And it shows you in a great documentary how he changes his health. And so he starts to include other people who are on masses of medication, people with diabetes, high blood pressure, lots of ailments that they have been told they need to be medicated for the rest of their lives. And through diet, needless to say, there's quite a happy ending at the end. So everybody check that out, Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead.
Isn't there another one that you've seen on Netflix?
Yes.
Not that long ago.
Well, there's quite a few. There's one called Forks Over Knives. Now that's a good one as well. But I still, my favorite was the Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead because it just drove it home so well. There's another brilliant one. And I think this is the one you're thinking of, Game Changers.
That's it. Everybody who sees that goes, oh, Lord. Game Changers on Netflix.
Yes. And that was brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah. That's a good one for you to watch with Darbs, your husband.
But you know what? I was just going to bring this up. This is one of my challenges. And I think I've had to learn to let it be.
Yeah.
Because can you imagine how frustrating it is, or it was, when I used to go to these vegan cooking classes? The first half of it would all be about health. Basically, why should you eat leafy greens every day? You should eat them because they're off the scales with nutrition, you know. But bung that kale into everything. You won't even taste it. But what it's giving your body is huge. So I would come home watching my husband, who has heart disease and diabetes, and he's on more pills than they've got at CVS, frankly. And he is resistant up to here. I cannot get close. I've tried everything. I cannot. He would not watch that with me. He would not come to Farm Sanctuary with me. He is in denial. He's in resistance. And that's who he is and where he is at this point in his life. And I have to. And it kills me because it won't have a good outcome.
Right.
You know, it can't. It's limiting his life. And I can't do anything about it. And it's hellish, to be honest.
Yes.
But I have to learn to say, sometimes you cannot impact on people. It has to be their journey, and they're doing what they're doing. And the more I go on about it, the more it would drive him crazy, and the more stubborn and cross. And it's awful. It's awful. But I don't know that I know what to do about it.
Right. Do you remember when the premiere of Piney was, where I had met you, where that beautiful buffet was, the meat buffet? So was that over a year ago?
I seem to remember it was kind of winter, so maybe it's
even more of a year.
Maybe 18 months.
The reason I ask is because that was the turning point. That I was a vegetarian.
We for our dogs, didn't we?
We what?
We stole the meat for our dogs.
Yes. Well,
it was a fancy Four Seasons.
We definitely procured meat, and what I found amusing was we'd just, I think, met for maybe the second time, like very casually, but I loved that we were the only kind of Brits in the place, and we were the only ones asking for the doggy bag. Because the buffet was so good. And my partner, because of him being Piney, he never got to eat because everybody wanted to meet the actor who played Piney. And so you were there and I got to know your husband a bit. And that's where I first said, oh, Darbs, are you a vegan as well? No. And he's tucking into his good bit of beef. Well, I was still cracking then. I was the weak vegetarian. Well, that's the exact scenario where I would crack. for a good bit of beef. It was the only meat I would eat was a bit of beef. And I had this ridiculous logic, but in my head it was like, well, I'm only eating a little bit of the cow. Like whereas people who eat a chicken, they've killed the chicken. Like you're responsible for a whole life. But if I eat like a little bit of the cow, maybe he's just sore that day. You know, I had ridiculous logic.
I didn't buy it anyway, so I haven't bought it. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, but it was a beautiful bit of meat, I gotta say. So me and Dobbs were like, oh, this is a good bit of meat, isn't it? And Dobbs was like, I'm gonna get her to get a box of this and bring it home, you know. And we managed. And then my partner was like starving, so we were the ones that left with the little cardboard boxes. But your meat was for your dogs and for dogs. Now, I think our dogs might have got a hair of that meat and the rest to Jason, you know. So.
Yes. You see, that's an interesting conundrum for me, because I know a lot of vegans who will only feed their dogs vegan dog food. And I haven't quite made my way into that territory yet. And it's a difficult one, because to be honest, I'm not sure where I stand on it, really. I mean, I shouldn't really be having anything to do with any meat whatsoever in my house. I mean, sometimes I cut up, they eat raw, which is supposed to be better for them. So I'm dealing with blood, and I do look at it and think, oh, shoot, I don't like this. I don't like it at all. But I suppose I don't know enough about what the alternative is and whether they would be safe on it. That's the problem. So what I'm saying is we are all at different stages of this. And that's why, you know, if anybody's listening and goes, she's an outrage, she's disgusting, well, so be it. I am where I am with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
You were where you were. You were having a little crash. But, you know, whatever you do that's going that way has an impact. That you can be sure of. Yeah. Because the dairy industry, for instance, is struggling. And I went to do some work with a lady in Pennsylvania. And she does a lot of work at puppy mills. And I went to a puppy mill, which is, well, just awful. Awful. But of course, that's a big dairy area around outside Philadelphia. Big dairy area. And they have a suicide hotline because those businesses are really struggling. And the government are sort of shoring them up. But they are, because slowly but surely there's been an impact as a result of people learning more about what's actually the truth behind it. No, it's not little happy cows in a field. That's not what it is. So, so there are things are shifting in different ways. Yes. And just, they always say, you know, people say, if you stop eating meat 3 days a week, that will have an impact financially. It will. Yeah, that's right. Well, as well, you often think that as an individual person, you can't change anything. But I saw a quote one day, and it was about what was being carried at Walmart. And they'd started to carry organic milk. And it said they're carrying organic milk, not because they care about organic, because that's what people want. So every time you purchase something, you're casting a ballot, you're voting. So if you choose the organic thing, the vegan thing, the vegetarian thing, you know. You see, that's an interesting one. That really is, because when I was at Farm Sanctuary, they explained to me, I was in the chicken area. There's some happy little chickens wandering around. And they said, just for your information, when it says free range, the reality of that is there has to be an opening to the, you know, sometimes they're in huge buildings, barns, whatever they are, you know, almost enormous. They're scrunched together. They can't even spread their wings. They're bunged together. But as long as at the end of that building, there is an opening that is actually very small, as long as there's one of those and a little tiny outside area, 90% of these birds can't get to this because there's too many of them in there. As long as that exists, they're allowed to say free range. Now, this is the truth behind it, you know. So if you care, you should just listen to those people who know these things and go, okay, well, with that in mind, do I want to eat those eggs? Maybe you do, or maybe you do, but at least know what's true. Yeah.
I don't eat eggs anymore, and mainly because I wasn't a super big egg person anyway. But then the filmmaker of Piney, Jane West Bakering, she one day brought over this beautiful care package because we'd had a conversation about being vegan, and I was quite clueless, to be honest with you. I had the
of course, and it's daunting.
Yeah, and I had the compassionate interest. Like that's where my interest was more even compassion than health for my personal self, because I love animals. But I was really clueless of how do you even stay healthy? Where do you get your protein? And she bought this care package, which was so sweet of her. And it contained all these different things that were basically like normal food, except they were vegan. So she was making a point that you can still eat all those things you love. And there was like cheesecake and like even meat slices, but they weren't meat, and cheese slices and butters. There's an amazing vegan butter, which is insane. It's called, I think, Mykonos, and they have it at
yes, they make cheese too.
I mean, that's like crack. That butter's so good. That butter's amazing.
And you know what, Natalie, that's all that needs to happen for people to transition and go, okay, I now know that exists.
Yes.
That's not a hard choice, actually.
That's right.
That really is the key.
Yes.
Because if it's not going to taste good, people are not going to want to do it. But if you can slowly introduce alternatives, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the fake meat thing, because for me, it doesn't really quite do it. So I'd rather just not have it. I'd rather have a really, really tasty, vegetable something or other, mushroom stroganoff, or there's a lovely thing I learned to make. I, as a child of the 70s, I'm older than you, so in the 70s, boeuf bourguignon was all rage in England.
As my mum would say, beef bourguignon.
Exactly, beef bourguignon, exactly. Well, it was all the rage because it was French and because it was stewing steak in a red wine sauce. Beautiful, thick red wine sauce with onions and beef. And that would be a posh old thing to have. And I used to love it. Now, at my vegan cooking class, they taught me bean bourguignon.
Oh.
And all I can tell you is the sauce is exactly what you remember. And it's got a kind of substance to it, which is white beans, as it happens. And it's very filling. But it's as tasty as ever, with a bit of mash and a green veg on the side. Lovely. So I don't feel I have to have boeuf bourguignon, as long as I can have bean bourguignon.
Yeah.
And it tastes good.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling... But it takes a little while. Like, she was great doing that for you. Because at the beginning, you're daunted. You go, oh, God, where am I going to start with this? And what if I can't cook it? And what if I, what if I run out of things to have? And slowly but surely, you just have to find things you really like.
Yeah, yeah. Like the Beyond Burger, I must say, does it for me for the beef. I feel that we've come full circle with, you're frozen right now. That was quite funny, though. You briefly froze. We've come full circle with talking about you and your rise to fame as a cook, and now we've come to the real you, who is a cook, and you're sharing your cooking tips. So it's
what I'm trying to say here is, actually, I'm not a cook, and what's very gratifying about this, and I hope encouraging to others, is you don't have to be a skilled cook to make food that tastes good. If you're choosing to go more in this direction, it's actually become quite good fun. And do I have many skills? No, I never did, and I still don't. But I'm learning, and it's become fun to do that and to find things that actually even non-vegans go, well, I made a chocolate cake the other day, fully vegan, not an egg, and dairy, anything. Nobody knew. They just went, oh, that's a good chocolate cake. Well, you don't even have to say it's vegan. It doesn't matter. But the point is, it tasted good.
Yeah. Brilliant. I want chocolate cake now.
Yes.
They have.
Hungry. I'm
and now, because we're talking about amazing things, and we will wrap up. I swear I'll let you go. But you know how they have the Magnum ice creams?
I've got several in my fridge. I'm having one a day at the moment. Chocolate ice.
Let listeners know Magnum ice creams are crazy tasty, and now they do the non-dairy option.
I've got a whole fridge full of them.
And that's what I found them at my local grocery store. Amazing.
Oh,
they're amazing.
Can you tell me, when we came to your house, and I've never been able to find them, you had, I think it was coconut bliss.
Yeah, it
You
was,
had
I think.
chocolate ices, and you sent me to a shop, and they
Yeah.
didn't have them.
No, no.
That shop you told me to go to.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've never found that particular one since. That's delicious too. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I've never seen those either, but I will say those vegan magnums, the salt,
Yeah.
caramel sea salt ones.
And if we're doing product placement, why not? Haagen-Dazs do non-dairy ones too, which have a kind of caramelly vanilla inside. Haagen-Dazs, non-dairy, delicious. They don't fall apart quite like the magnums do.
Oh,
These are a great alternative. I'm going to have to go get some.
I know. I mean, now I'm going to have to go out and buy these because it was my partner and mine's birthdays like a week ago. We both have a birthday.
Oh.
And for his, we're self-isolating basically still in the pandemic. So it's like, well, we can't really go anywhere. And both of us, because I guess this is what happens when you've got anxiety, there's a pandemic, there's global unrest in the world, and you're craving comfort food. So we both said, what do we want? We were like, we want ice cream. So we went and I bought like 8 boxes of those magnums. I mean, that was like, if I'm buying these, I'm going to stock up. And of course, with the pandemic, you want to try and limit how many times you go to the grocery stores. So you don't want to go every day. So we're like stocking up the cart and going maybe every 2 weeks if possible, but we got Haagen-Dazs and tons of ice cream. And I mean, we gorged. It's a wonder that there wasn't some
great stuff, right?
I mean, it's so good. But those sorts of things, and I mean, I really applaud brands for stepping up and providing that alternative. I really.
And also, do you know what? They're really like Marks and Spencer's, for instance, big famous store in England. Before I left, which was 5 years ago, they were rubbish. They were useless. I was kind of looking at it then a bit. I wasn't fully vegan or anything like it, but I was interested to see what the alternatives were. I stopped going because catch up, guys. This is useless. Now, apparently, they are walls and walls of it because they see.
Yeah.
And so did McDonald's, and so did Burger King, and so apparently do KFC. They're seeing the way it's going. They'd be very stupid not to keep up. I know we're nearly wrapping up, but I was asked the other day to endorse one of those meal kits where they bring it to your door.
Oh, yeah.
You can, and they said something like, would you, if we gave you, this is kind of what happens, if you do a few freebies, would you mind putting something nice on the website? And I looked at what they were providing, and I said, well, I'm a non-starter because you've only got vegetarian. And they said, well, funny enough, we are working on our vegan option. And I said, well, I'd keep working. Yeah. Because I think you'll find it will be quite an issue if you don't.
Yeah. Good for you. Well, the world's changing, I believe, for the better. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, I think the world, having still been recovering from trauma, the world is in a state of trauma right now.
Yes.
I think everyone
people are being forced to stop, and not everybody will, but you're being encouraged to reevaluate certain things. And my agent, my dear friend and agent in London, said to me the other day, he said, some absolutely amazing things have happened to me during this pandemic because I've been forced to stop, which was a distraction always from other things that were in the back of my mind. I've been forced to sit back and spend some time with myself. And he said, it's been an extraordinary thing. Yeah. Because he's aware enough to notice that,
Yeah. I think that awareness is blossoming like a sheltered flower, and people are learning a lot. Like my squash. That is living now. I'll send you a picture. My squash is
Let me give them names. I think they need names now because they're survivors. I think give them a name.
I give some things names, like Jason's. We've got the squirrel that's eating all our avocados off the tree. And so he's now Cyril the squirrel, which is really not, it's not a creative name. That really is. I think that's a name you come up with when you're 80 years old, Cyril the squirrel. I think Jason should have done better, but Yeah. Well, I know you've got all sorts to do and Darb's home and it's Sunday. And I'm just so grateful that we were
Really?
able. What are you doing today with Darbs? Anything?
Hell knows what. No. I've had a very interesting rush of activity. Yesterday, I was on 2 podcasts, and this is my 3rd podcast.
Wow.
I mean, who knew what Zoom was till about 2 months ago?
Yeah.
I'm a prophet now. I'm a Zoom expert.
Yeah.
No, this is the highlight of my day, Nat. Thank you very much. And because we are moving, I'm afraid I have to go and do the boring stuff, which is working my way through excess amounts of paper and throwing stuff out. I do like doing, actually. I do like throwing things out.
Yeah.
But that's not very exciting. It's not nearly as exciting as sitting with you.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. Well, it's always, from the moment I met you, it always has that feeling of that you already know this person. And
yes,
that's how I think anybody listening to this interview, you've got no airs and graces. You're just so lovely to talk to. You're a beautiful spirit. I support everything you believe in, and you're a great role model. You've already, just through you being you've already had a knock-on effect with me. And the vegan thing and an awareness, and now with my partner Jason, and now we're talking about it on the podcast, and people will be looking up these brands, and so thank you, Leslie.
All right then.
Such a good influence. Carry on. You're about to say you love me. I know you are.
No, I'm lunch. I'm saying lunch. Sure. And I love you. And I'm having my B12 because you have to have those when you're vegan. You are eating B12, aren't you?
I got the spray. I got the little under the tongue spray.
Oh, you didn't know the spray. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Jane of Piney.
That's very important.
Yeah. Okay. Jane of Piney told me about the spray.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I don't think I knew they were vegan. I don't think I knew that. So when they had the Piney event, is that why there were a few vegan options?
Yes.
Okay, makes sense. All right, sweetie.
Okay. Well, I lunch you too.
Yeah, I lunch you more.
Thank you so much for your time, Leslie. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Yeah, this is awesome. Okay, talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye. I told you, right? Great person, right? The kind of person that you just want to be best friends with. And especially you feel with Leslie that you kind of already are a best friend. I know it may be one-sided, but I'm fairly sure that she meant to say that she loved me. I can tell you I have some crazy juicy episodes lined up. You wouldn't believe. You won't even. I'm gonna get my millennial aunt. You won't even. Okay? When you know who's going to be on my podcast and the kind of people. It's ridiculous. We're talking out of this world. And yes, that's a clue. Okay. Take care, everybody. This is my first Zoom podcast and I don't know how to end it.